No drone, no drone, no drone, no drone.
Welcome to the Photo Focus Roundtable Episode 2 for February 2022. Color. Let's first thank our sponsor for today's episode, Photomatics, for high dynamic range photography. Download and try Photomatics Pro for free at hdrsoft.com. It's our monthly roundtable where we offer our own takes on current trends and not so much about daily news. We bring one photo focus author each month, and we can expand or critique that article and hopefully introduce some of the writers to our podcast audio audience. For the February show, we're going to talk about how we handle pricing and the trend toward photographers picking up video skills. And then we'll focus on Julie's article and expand on the subject of color. Take that where it goes. I'm here with, as always, Rob Moroto from robmoroto.com. Hi, Rob.
Hello, and thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks for being my partner in this. A new voice you might not know. You might know Jeff Sullivan from not too far from me, actually, up here in California. How's it going, Jeff?
Good, Ron. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. We're going to hear more about Jeff in a little bit. And we have our photo focus author, thrilled to be here, being featured, Julie Powell from Down Under. Hi, Julie.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for fitting us into your time zone. That was tough to organize. All of these
morning.
Yeah, all of us, the three guys here, we're all on the West Coast time, aren't we? Nice. Julie's our featured guest. What's going on with you these days? What's the current project you're working on?
Well, I've just opened the studio back up after having it shut for a couple of months. Yay, COVID. So we've been really busy. We've been running a lot of workshops and classes, mentoring, doing one-on-one and stuff like that. So, and finally getting back into the studio to do some of my own personal projects. So that's been a huge amount of fun. Spent a whole day shooting yesterday, actually, to get started on some of my own personal projects. So work with a collaboration of a couple of other artists. So costume designers and headpiece designers and stuff like that. So, yeah, having loads of fun.
Do you have people in the studio, or is it?
Yeah, so we had a couple of models yesterday, and we've got a team. I work with a team of hair and makeup artists and designers and stuff like that as well. So I do a lot of creative portraits and things like that as well. So
real good old photography of models. It's back.
Yeah, right? real models.
I should mention you're in the Melbourne area, so you have business with public, and you're not out in the sticks.
Well, yes and no. I'm about 45k from Melbourne CBD, so I'm in the southeastern suburbs. 30 years ago it was regional, but it's now part of Melbourne.
Did you say CBD?
CBD, yeah. It's Central Business District.
Oh. CBD, I think, means something different these days.
Melbourne has... We tend to expand our capital cities out, whereas you guys have your city and then all your towns around it. These days it's just Melbourne. Melbourne goes on for 100 k's now. It's ridiculous.
You don't really have to answer this, but you're saying CBD is legal in Australia?
Yeah, boy, what is it?
Does anybody get my joke? I don't know. It's the
You are from California, aren't you?
I'm in California. It's the CBD is the part of the marijuana plant that doesn't get you high. It has apparently, I don't know too much about this, but it's popular here to advertise and everything. So apparently it has all kinds of medicinal benefits or something. So, all right. So before we get into our topics, let's hear a little bit about Jeff Sullivan. I know he is workshop extraordinaire. Nighttime photography is mostly. Is that my understanding right?
Landscape photography, a lot of national parks and public lands, but also a fair amount of night photography too. I won an award in 2011, the International Astronomy Photographer of the Year, People in Space Special Prize, and I said, oh, maybe I should do this night photography thing more, and incorporated that into the workshops. So, and then I actually got a cover of Outdoor Photographer magazine that same year around the same time. And so it definitely just seemed like a good specialty to focus on.
Nice. I think that's what I know. Most of your work is from the ghost towns at night. But then,
very early on, we found out that we could get into the ghost town of Bodie. It's a state park in California, but it closes at 5 o'clock. So you never get to get a good sunrise or sunset or night photography. And we heard that they were going to reopen their access to people with enough insurance and so forth for night photography. So we were actually the first people to organize a trip out there when they rekindled or restarted their night photography program in June 2012. So we're entering our, I guess it's 11th year now, and we've been running about 5 night photography workshops a year. And some years we do 3 interior access too. And when you think about how Bodie kind of became a ghost town, the mining in the Wild West would take off for 5 or 10 years. In Bodie's case, it was probably more like 30. But then when it would peter out, people didn't have moving trucks back then. So you wouldn't bring all your stuff with you. You'd hop on a horse or hop in a wagon and bring whatever would fit in the wagon, and everything else just got left behind. And the people who were still in the area, the Bridgeport area near Bodie, wanted to preserve the history, because a lot of these houses were associated with their generations of their families. So I guess one guy stayed there and kept buying out the properties when people would leave. And then in the early 60s, he approached the state, or they approached him, and they still had over 110 buildings with a lot of personal effects inside and a lot of the old artifacts. So it was interesting when the state bought the properties and the land and the town from this gentleman. I forget who still had it, but one of the stipulations was that they had to keep it as is. So the way they've interpreted that is that they need to keep it in a state of arrested decay, where as much as they can, they approximately keep it as if you were walking into this town in the 1960s. Wow. So they'll fix things like put on a new roof, but they'll age the boards first, or to replace sideboards and things like that. They'll try to match it up so it kind of fits in, and they'll replace the board, but they won't like put a fresh coat of paint on, or, you know, anything that makes it look kind of remodeled or updated. So it's really cool to be able to kind of engage in that piece of fantasy or fiction that you're, you know, walking into this town and just discovering it for the first time. And it's probably a little harder to do during the day when you have, you know, maybe a few hundred other people walking around. But when you get in there at night and all the staff is off having dinner in their residences and so forth, and you're the only one walking around, or you're walking around with 5 or 6 photographers, it's really easy to kind of get into that whole kind of frontier spirit and see the sky the way they saw it, because there aren't a lot of street lights or anything. Very few lights in the area. When they're open, is it a place that has tours? Is that what's... They let you walk around. It's a fairly big town. They have maybe only 10% of the buildings still standing. There were a couple of fires, one in the 30s, that burned down most of the town, but the buildings that are still there, you can walk around and check them out and look in the windows, and there are 1 or 2 buildings that you can walk into. And there are a couple of particular tours they'll do, like the mill. They don't want people up in the stamp mill climbing all over the rafters or whatever. It'd be a little dangerous. So they'll do guided tours there about maybe 3 times a day, like at 11, 1, and 3, something like that. And there are some interpretive tours like that. And then once a year, they'll do what they call Friends of Bodie Day. I believe it's the 2nd Saturday in August. It's always near the beginning of August. And they'll do all kinds of interpretive events for that. And people dress in period costume. They'll pick a decade of Bodhi's history, and if you have an old car from that decade, you can drive it in and again, pretend that you're kind of in period for that decade in Bodhi. And they'll have gunfights in the street and all kinds of things like that. They'll have horses and wagons coming through, and
they should have shot Westworld there.
Yeah, it's a fun it's a lot of fun. And then some of the stuff's a little more serious. Like they might have an interpretive program one year where they have people dressed up in the cemetery as the person that's in that grave. So they'll have a lot of the backstory and tell you what their life is like and all that kind of thing.
Well,
so
we've never met in real life, but when we've been talking over some time, and when I remember kind of discovered you. I mean, there's a lot of Northern California really great. I think about you as those nighttime ones with the Milky Way in Bodhi, and it made me realize there's so much more around me. We're in this wonderful Northern California. It's kind of a photographer's paradise, really, and there's so much I don't know about. And it just took some hearing about these things. So I kind of want to pass that on. If anybody is in the area or coming to the area, don't forget up in the hills there are some amazing places that aren't as popular as the known.
There's great towns where you can go and have a family gunfight. That's great.
Yeah.
They don't want any guns in town during the day, I should say, real or replicas.
Sorry.
There's always a law enforcement ranger on hand to take care of anybody that's breaking those kinds of rules.
Buzzkill. And speaking of buzzkills, we have to charge our customers for things, which isn't fun. How's that for a segue, guys? And I wanted to bring, for the first discussion topic, I wanted to bring up pricing and see what you guys are doing, how you handle pricing models, what the pros and cons you're getting from those things. I have my own reasons for asking, and I might chime in if nobody touches on them. But how are you handling that, Rob? I know.
Yeah, like my business is very different from your guys'. You guys make money off of more education, and we do real estate photography, so we get paid for shooting houses, and we get paid very little for shooting houses, and so we do volume for our work. It's essentially like being like the Walmart portrait photographer, right? You're not there for getting the artistic shots to go onto the cover of Vanity Fair or anything. No, you're there just to cycle people through. And for real estate, it's the same thing. We shoot, anywhere from 20 to 30. Well, actually, let's see now. Nowadays, right now, we're probably around 10 to 20 houses a day, and it's all a volumes game. So our pricing is very simple. We look at it and say, how much time do we put in? How much is our time worth? And then we charge that straight to the client. And so we don't do anything about licensing fees or anything like that. There's just no value in that.
Really not necessary for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Ron and I have talked about the way that I look at pricing on other podcasts and other shows, and it essentially just comes down to what is my time worth and how much how much time does something take to do, and that's how I price everything out. But it's interesting because now you guys are doing workshops and you're doing education, and recently I've been getting a lot of clients that are asking me to be their mentors and to teach them how to do the real estate photography that I do and to be a support there. And so what I've done for myself is just said, well, you know what, I charge $125 an hour for doing photography. I might as well just charge $125 for mentoring and just keep all my rates the same, because then the math is easy for me. But how do you guys look at it?
I would say the trend in photography is very much going toward education, like workshops that are out, like Jeff is doing out in the real world with actual people showing up again, and Julie doing that and also online. And that's talk about trends. That's one place that photography is going. So the pricing of that is a very legitimate thing to think about. There's probably people who want to take such things and want to start offering their own. So yeah, how do you guys handle that?
I've actually found that there's a real move, not just in education, but in experience. Like people want an experience. And I guess the prices really fluctuate. I mean, I know there are people out there who are, you know, offering workshops for, believe it or not, like, you know, $30 for a workshop, and you're like, seriously?
Yeah, why?
But I mean, I sit there and I look at, there's people who are charging way more than what I do, for instance, but I kind of look at it as what I'm prepared to pay too. So I need to be able to work out what's going to be worth my time, as against, you know, what I think people are going to be happy enough to be able to pay. Because I guess that's the other thing coming out of COVID, especially here, because we've been in, you know, lockdown from hell. A lot of people either have expendable money, but now they're really busy with work, or because they've been not working for 6 months or 8 months or whatever, money's been really tight options. So it's sort of this balancing act as to what price you can do. And I've gradually been putting my prices up a little bit, but I'm offering a heck of a lot more than what I was 2 years ago, because everybody seems to want this whole experience thing. So I can turn around and I can put out a workshop in, you know, how to use lighting or whatever. So, and people are like, yeah, that's all right. But if I turn around and add something else into it, like an over-the-top theme, then that's going to book out, guaranteed. And I know I don't have to worry about that.
So, sorry, I'm just going to jump in there. What do you mean, like an over-the-top theme?
Okay, so here's one for you. I had a lot of people asking me, they kept saying their biggest struggle was lighting. So we ran a workshop. I had it all mapped out for using 1, 2, and 3 lights. And I had 2 people book into it.
Huh.
And I'm like, And I sort of asked somebody who I felt I could trust, and they went, oh, but it's just lighting. There's nothing else. It's boring. Yeah. So very quickly we did a turnaround, pulled in a model and all the rest of it, and we did this Moulin Rouge theme. And sold out instantly.
Cool.
I did a shoot the other weekend, and I hadn't even edited the photos. I just released some of the behind the scenes footage, which is something I do a lot. And that workshop had sold out, and the second one had sold out, and the third one's now up and running, and I still haven't edited all the photos yet. And that was a week ago. So that's just, so I have a huge studio wardrobe. I work with a great team of makeup artists and creators and people who do headpieces and things like that. We had a whole shoot yesterday, which I'm pretty sure, and we were discussing it yesterday, once the photos hit the web, that's going to be everyone going, oh, can we do that as a workshop? So I incorporate everything else into it, you know, how to set up the lights and how to do all this, but they want the whole experience. They want to be able to come away with something that they can go, oh, wow, I took that, as opposed to learning how to pose or learning how to light. Those workshops aren't selling really anymore.
So you're like the cool high school teacher that takes the kids on a field trip that's really exciting, like taking them to like Coney Island and going on to a roller coaster to teach them about the physics of gravity.
Pretty much.
So that's brilliant.
That's a cool analogy. I love that.
What do you think? What do you think, Jeff? What about going into Ghost Town and getting Boba Fett versus Cad Bane for some photo shoots?
Oh, wouldn't that be cool?
Well, it's funny. One of the first workshops we did, we had Galen Rowell's son Tony come out, and he had booked a film shoot there, and he had a guy with a horse and cowboy outfit on, and people in period dress and all that. So it's definitely something that you can do. You go through a different permitting process, but we're doing a lot of the still photography shoots, but we are considering doing a film permit for time lapse. But we could bring in, if somebody wants to come in and ride a buffalo through town or something, we'd be there. We could do that. Absolutely could set that up.
Even what you're doing, Jeff, though, is still an experience. I mean,
absolutely.
I would love to go and shoot a ghost town. That would just be awesome. We
It's
don't
amazing.
have much like that here at all. I've done one ghost town, but
part of
nothing
the
like what you
challenge
guys
we
do.
have here in the States is we have so many cities in the whole eastern half of the country that you can't even see the Milky Way very well. So we get people booking from like Chicago or Boston or Florida or even Europe, and they'll say, I've never seen the Milky Way. I want to see if you can actually see it, and see if then I'll see if I can get it in my camera, but I don't think you can really see it. It's probably just the camera. And then you get them out there, and after about 5-10 minutes, their eyes start to adjust. Then after 20, they can see really well. They're like, wow, you really can see it. And it's really cool. I get a lot of people that later, they're posting on social media, and they're like, and this is all Jeff Sullivan's fault. My husband, I have to drag him around, and he has to make sure I'm safe out there. And, I got this new passion, and I just blame Jeff.
It sounds like
the last time I went out and did night photography, somebody took me out and they're like, yeah, just go. It'll be fun. Here's how you do it. And I went out, I got out there, and this was years and years and years and years ago. And it's almost embarrassing to say, I had one of those SLR cameras that had the little pop-up flash.
Right.
And my God, when your eyes adjust to see the Milky Way and somebody shoots off a camera with a flash, you just go blind.
We went out to Central Australia a few years ago, and I mean, there is no light pollution at all. And just to be able to stand in there and seeing the whole galactic core lighting up the whole sky is an amazing experience.
That
absolutely
might be a new bucket list
amazing
item.
We do Astro sort of about an hour from here, because that's how far we have to go to get away. We've just got so much light pollution. We don't really have any dark space at all. But to be able to go out in Central Australia, I don't know, Ayers Rock, or what do you guys know what it is? Ayers Rock, Uluru?
Sure. Ayers Rock.
Yeah. Out towards that way. And I mean, there's no light pollution, and be able to, I mean, we were smack bang in the middle of winter. So it was absolutely freezing, but, just incredible.
So Julie, then just for my own curiosity, like if you were doing your lighting course, and then you had your Moulin Rouge course. Of course, the Moulin Rouge course is going to take more time and prep and everything like that. As well as getting the models and getting all your the costumes and everything. But in terms of like a comparison between like the amount of time and effort put in to do one and the time and effort to put into the other, if you look at it from like your return on your investment for that additional work, like how much would you say a difference would be, like in say your courses, like from just a simple lighting course to a Moulin Rouge course? Would you be looking at double or triple, or is it just the volume that you get it actually booked up?
If they sell out, you might
more than anything. But generally speaking, I didn't. That one was I didn't really change the price on the tickets or anything like that. We didn't. We had a Moulin Rouge theme, but it wasn't. I already had the costume. The model was already booked, so I already had to put that into account. I didn't have hair and makeup for that one, so the model did her own. So it was probably a sort of a mid-range, but yeah, it was more on volume. But even then, I quite often will I'll repeat the workshop several times. So I'm still got my costs that are going into it, but because I'm doing more volume, and especially if I'm doing it over, if I'm doing 2 or 3 in a day, I only have to pay for one lot of hair and makeup and things like that. So a lot of the costumes we either borrow or we make ourselves. So we do buy stuff, but it's easier to, especially when we're working on, really big over-the-top headpieces. I borrow them on commission for photos for the designers, because I mean, where do you store 30 or 40 headpieces that are so big? So I'll borrow them for a time and then return them. But the price I do have to calculate. So if I've got something, I've got workshops coming up next weekend, and I've got hair and makeup, I've got models, I've got assistants that are coming in. So all of that has to be priced in. So they would be a slightly more expensive workshop than if it was just a plain old, let's just get somebody in jeans and a T-shirt and do posing or whatever, which people do. But I'm just finding that, I guess, because I've offered a BMW, trying to pop a Mini in, people just aren't part. I don't want it. They want the top of the range.
Are your costs going up? Like what other people are charging for their services or anything else around here we've got prices going up on just about everything.
I have been gradually, my prices have gone up from last year, but costs associated with that have gone up. So I'm finding that my models are now asking slightly higher hourly rate. Hair and makeup has gone up a little bit as well. I guess everyone's just trying to recoup on not being able to work for so long. But at the same time, every now and again, I had an invitational only studio session the other week. And the price on that was quite high, mainly because the models rate was quite high. But nobody blinked. And I thought,
interesting.
Maybe I should pop them up a bit more. But there's people out there charging 3 times what I'm charging, but I sit there and go, ooh, I don't think I'd pay that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if what we do responds to the same price signals as other things, just with my experience lately about just, say, going to the barbecue restaurant or something like that. I'm kind of sticker shocked with what's been happening. And I've been telling myself, and I thought I would pass on to anybody that listens as photographers, that this is what's happening. And we always struggle with what we're charging, what's the right amounts and all these things. I had a million discussions about pricing over the years, and a lot of people undervalue their value. And
totally.
So but once we find what we think is professional, it's grown up, it's established, it's mature, then we get comfortable with it. And I just want to try to pass on the suggestion of being comfortable with when you have to raise prices, because now when it costs $75 to take me and my 2 kids out for a relatively regular meal, a barbecue restaurant, I'm sorry, but that's life. And we have to adjust the same way. So I guess what I'm wanting to throw out there is, if you feel like this pressure is happening to raise your prices, don't feel bad about it. It's the way it is. It's not your fault. It's the way it is. And as Julie said, a lot of times people won't blink. Charge for the better service, charge for it. And there's no apology needed for that. That's how it is, and people won't flinch.
I think like you were saying, it's one of those weird sort of situations that we always undervalue our services and our prices and ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you get an accountant who will come in and just charge, A, B, C, and they won't even blink about it. But for whatever reason, when it comes to photography, we never seem to, we sort of balk at running, charging sort of prices that some people are asking. And you think, I know with portraits, and I've veered so far away from doing client portraits, I do so few these days, that, everyone always used to tell me, oh, you don't charge enough. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I don't want to sit there and charge somebody $3,000 for 2 photos. You're like, what? No. But we undervalue ourselves a lot.
Well, I tell you, even Rob selling himself short a little bit earlier, saying that it's volume and not looking for the great quality. But real estate photography clients still want a certain level
quality.
of quality too, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated and more able to say what they want, and
But then again, so is the iPhone.
yes, indeed, that's right. But every genre of photography is going to respond to the pricing. So undercharging for real estate, I think, is a huge mistake as well. And as a fairly experienced real estate photographer myself, it's way harder than people think.
Yeah. So, and remember, there's always going to be somebody that's cheaper. Always somebody
always.
cheaper.
Yeah. We might bring up something about that when we're talking about color in a little bit. But let's move on though. In fact, part of pricing is adding services, right? When people are asking for more or asking you to add services to what you're already doing. And that's been happening to most of us regarding video. Everyone asking for video. As a panoramic photographer doing virtual tours for many years before it caught on, I was always asked about video. And I said, you really want what I do instead of video, but that's changing now. So anyway, we've all had to sort of take that on one level or another. Have you guys done that? And do you have any advice for those photographers saying, oh boy, now since my camera offers great video capabilities, I don't have any excuse. Do I need to do it? What do you think?
I think we've gone through that whole transition where we started out, when we did our first session out at Bodie, it was basically just a one-night access, and we were charging that way. And so, we kind of divided up, well, what are all our costs? And there's the insurance and a little bit of travel, a little bit of hotel, et cetera. And it was kind of a bottom-up approach. But then we found that we actually did that kind of approach. We had to keep bumping it up because we'd realize, oh yeah, we have costs if we get a flat tire. We have costs if we, X, Y, and Z, car breaks down, et cetera. You got to consider those things. And after all your expenses, including all the ones you didn't consider, you still then have to get paid. So we would bump it up slowly, trying to get to a point where, we were healthy financially, not getting rich, but at least covering our costs and a little bit more. And what we found was that when you just go in for the night, the people may not necessarily, be very coordinated as far as working with their cameras in the dark. They may not know the settings to use. And of course, you're trying to teach them that on the fly. And it's very hard to do in a single night. So we found out it was kind of like herding cats. And we always had this hour of herding cats stage, and we moved that more and more earlier in the night so that you wouldn't have to waste some of your precious dark time, which might only be a little over almost 2.5 hours in the middle of the summer when the sunsets are late. So what we started to do, and also then too, people would find out, or you'd find out, you'd see their pictures later and you go, oh, they got a great picture, but they didn't edit it the way, that I know they could and get a great result. So we started adding pre-days for warm-up, and like the first night is get everybody comfortable with night photography, and you do it in a great place so the people who are already experiencing good can still get some great shots. And then the second night you're starting to work together as a group, and people are getting better at keeping their headlamps off and not blowing out the foreground and screwing up everybody else's shot, and you're getting kind of coordinated. Then by the third night, when we go into Bodie, we're working as a team. We're like a hockey team, where all the timing's right and everybody's ready to go and the shots are coming fast. And then you just move around and it's go composition, composition, composition. And so we found that some people are there for kind of the experience of the ghost town, and some of the women want maybe safety at night. Then we have the instruction, maybe it's exposure, how to get focus at night, all that. Some of the people they could get their own session, but they want the guiding to the good composition, so they're not wasting that 2.5 hours of precious nighttime. And still others want to know, what do we do for lighting? And we can do all the lighting for them, so we have multiple different processes that we can use for that for different subjects. And then we get into the post-processing, which we'll do after the first 2 nights, so that they even get practice in that. So then if they want to modify their process on the third night, they'll know why they might want to do bracketing or multiple shots at night, so they can do sky stacking and noise reduction. But then we also can get into star trails, the sky stacking software, and even time lapses. So kind of segues back into your talk about video. We're finding that not only does social media reward having some moving pictures now that everybody does text and images, but we need to put together a demo reel basically, and also help people with turn their own night photography into time-lapse sequences. So we're definitely going to get into more video and incorporate that into our whole suite of offerings.
Yeah, time-lapse, a whole other genre to consider for that. Are you talking about also doing like behind-the-scenes type video for promo?
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of that for sure. I mean, we're talking to more people, kind of like this podcast here today. We're working with some people who do some video, and we'll definitely, I think, do more things where we intersect with them in the field and do some behind the scenes, and as well as showcase some of our time lapses. So it's kind of cool to see the Milky Way rise, then move across the sky, and set that to music or crickets or whatever, frogs or what have you.
Part of what people like after the workshop is some of those short videos of them shooting and with the group, and that's kind of the modern snapshot almost, isn't it? Where you just show others what you did, and I think that could be a fun part of the product.
Absolutely.
Rob, you're doing real estate video, which I know, promotional video with some motion and music, yeah?
We've been doing video now for I think 5, 6, 7 years, and it's it always started off as a well, in our industry, selling real estate, you want to be on the cutting edge of any of the technologies that are out there. So we were one of the first to bring on the 3D tours. We were the first to bring on the videos, and so whatever comes up, we do, just so that we've got something different that we go to our clients and say, hey, realtors, guess what else we can do for you? Will you pay us for it? And we can, keep ourselves relevant and current. So we're finding the pressure to do video quite high. And we've even gotten to the point where we've even did different types of videos. So we're doing videos using actual SLR cameras. And then we're actually doing videos of houses for clients using an iPhone on a gimbal. And we're even now, the newest trend that we're working with is doing vertical iPhone video clips so that they can put those onto Instagram Reels. So anytime the technology or the social media stuff changes, then that's when we have to change and be first in line to get it out to our clients. Because if we don't, then somebody else will. And we don't want somebody else to beat us to the punch with anything.
I really like that you're using an iPhone with I happen to know, because I got one on your advice, $100 little gimbal. So you can, and the gimbal but you can walk around and reduce the shake and use the gimbal just to get some of those creative shots with a little bit of parallax, a little bit of motion, and then those go together really quickly, and use iMovie for that, right?
We use iMovie, we use Premiere Pro. It just depends on who's doing the editing, what they're most comfortable with. Right. But Jeff, I was I like what you were saying there about taking the behind the scenes videos and stuff. And this is a neat trend because I've noticed that in workshop things, and it's almost like a wedding videographer said this to me once. They said they don't have us here because yes, they have us here for one reason only. So that they can party, have a lot of fun, and then have record of what they actually did. Because most of the time, you're running around doing all this stuff that you actually forget that you're actually there and being part of it. You want to relive that experience again. So it's interesting that you're looking at using video now as a way to relive the experience that you're teaching, which is still photography. So it is still photography, but then now you're bringing in the video component to support that.
I've actually found I get more hits, likes, whatever, on whether it's on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram on all the behind the scenes videos that we do for shoots. People love to be able to see all of that, and even if it's just really badly captured, and I'm not I'm not the world's best videographer, that's for sure. And it's just captured and put together, but they just love to be able to see what goes on behind the scenes, whether it's complete insanity with costumes everywhere or whatever. But the same with workshops. So years ago, I would find if I took videos or photos, in a workshop, people would be like, no, I don't want to be in the photos. Now so much they don't care. They want to be seen as being there, and like you were saying, they want to relive the experience and see behind the scenes and how things are set up.
Since we probably wouldn't have predicted that some behind the scenes videos of us looking silly, taking photos and being in our element and all, that's popular. And I totally agree. I think that's a great thing that you can give a client after something like that. And I don't think we would have predicted the way the real estate videos are going these days either. So that brings me to the question, what do you guys predict will be the next trend in video? No predictors.
No idea.
Well, we could add into that we probably didn't see drone video being as good as it is at this point.
Yeah, it's getting so good. I'm about ready to go there finally. But yeah. I want one that'll do night, of course.
That shouldn't
be a
hard one there.
We have a drone that sits in the cupboard and never gets used.
Right. I don't want to have that. I want one that will actually use.
It's so hard to actually fly a drone in Australia. Most places you're just not allowed to. We've given up.
I have the kind that's so small that there's no legal issues with it. It's made to be underneath the weight that you don't have to do any registering.
Oh, wow. What is that weight? Like a pound or something?
I think it's the same down there as it is up here. It's 249 grams.
I believe that's right.
It's really small.
Yes, I believe that's right.
Here it doesn't matter. Weight's irrelevant. If you're not allowed to fly, you're not allowed to fly. End of story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether it's this big or this big or this big. So many places. You're not allowed to fly in a national park, and a great deal of Australia's national park.
Yeah, they closed our national parks as well.
Nowhere to fly it anywhere near a playing thing. So, yeah, it's we took it on our last trip, but everywhere you go, there's signs, no drone, no drone, no drone, no drone. Places where you'd really want drone shots. So
right.
The funny thing is around here with less restrictions, and we still have them, but it's the U.S. We have less than most places. And you would think there'd be drones flying around all the time, but I rarely see a drone. Sometimes we have a big park next over here, and sometimes someone will like me, will be flying the drone around just for fun. And you would think they would just be everywhere, right? If there's no restrictions for 249 grams. So why doesn't everybody have those? They're not expensive. You sell them at Costco. You'd think that they would be flying around everywhere.
Now, Ron, would you be able to get around the restrictions in national parks, or that I would think that would still be applying to yours, even though it's a small one?
I would assume so, and I'm not into drones, so I haven't really looked into it too deeply, but that's why I got the one where I didn't have to go out and do a bunch of registering and things. And I guess what I'm just being a little sarcastic, it wasn't clear enough that these laws are there so that, if there's no laws, people will be flying around everywhere and looking in everybody's windows and all that. Well, that doesn't happen. I hardly ever see them. And it might be because, like Julie, like I have one that sits mostly under the couch, uncharged, and it doesn't really get out much. So maybe it's just not as cool as we all think it's going to be. It's a tool for photography, and it's not so much of people are just playing with them and doing bad things.
I think here in Nevada, if you were flying it around your neighborhood, if it went over too many other people's yards, it would get shot down pretty quickly.
That's true too. Yeah. You do run the risk.
Being out here in the Wild West.
In the very what's the right overly polite Bay Area, you would just get a bunch of people calling the cops, I suppose. I don't know what would happen.
Right.
See, we're not allowed to fly over residential areas.
Yeah, I don't know.
You have to have a permit.
You're not allowed to spy on people.
Yeah.
You could get in trouble if you were looking over their fence or into their house, for sure.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how you get around that in real estate photography, but...
You just need a permit.
No, we just run very fast.
Right.
Well, the
That
usual.
makes
I mean, I know here the privacy laws are that you can take a picture of someone's home while you're walking down the sidewalk, and if their windows are open, their windows are open. Now, if you're using technology, then you have a problem, and technology gets defined in different ways, but it basically means a zoom lens. So you can't zoom in someone's room and take pictures, and that's fine. But you can use a regular, say a 50 millimeter or a cell phone camera, and that's fine. So I don't know how that applies to flying over someone's backyard. That I would like to know the answer to that. Maybe we'll bring in a drone expert for one of these shows and get the scoop.
Well, here in Nevada, we have the advantage that I think it's 63% of the state is BLM land, and BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is basically anything goes for the most part. So over half the state, you can go out and fly your drone like crazy. You just got to find the BLM that has the picturesque rock formations or the dry lake beds or slot canyons, et cetera, et cetera. So,
and the lowest number of gun owners.
Yes, exactly. Far enough from private property and somebody's aim.
And there might be a market for more workshops to take around on drone tours.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right.
So before we talk about Julie a little bit more, Jeff, got to give you your chance to answer our completely random grab bag question. It's semi-random, but actually it's not too random because we asked the same one last time. I thought it was fun. Especially for you, because where you are and what you do for photography is a destination. So all expenses paid. If you could go anywhere to photograph, where would it be?
Oh, wow. The easy answer would be Iceland, I guess, because that's so diverse, has so many interesting locations. And for me, if I could get up there when the Northern Lights are going, that would be phenomenal. I think Alaska, if I didn't want to travel internationally due to airplane travel and, different countries' COVID restrictions these days, I would say Alaska would be high up there. Or even going up to Canada, the Banff area and up in the Canadian Rockies would be really cool. Oh, yeah. But we're kind of, I wouldn't say we're getting burnout on photography, but we might want to diversify a little bit. My co-instructor and I, Lori Hibbett and I, are really into wines. We were thinking, well, maybe we should do more of a travel trip and go to Burgundy and the Rhone and, Bordeaux or Rioja or Italy, the Tuscany. So, if we can ever get around some of the stupid pandemic going on forever, we got a lot of great ideas, and we'd love to do some stuff that would be really fun along the travel photography lines.
We were talking about that with our last guest, Lori Novak. We were saying, okay, let's make this really fun. Let's have a bottle of wine, and we'll just start drinking at the beginning and see where we get to. I think that'd be a fun episode for us.
We do want to do drunk episodes at some point.
Yeah, we'll call it the Drunken Photographer episode. I think it'd be fantastic.
Well, I tell you, I drove into part of Rioja, or maybe it was Ribera del Duero is another area in Spain.
Yep.
And it was so funny because I was expecting Italian style wine country, which is just gorgeous, and Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. Kind of looks like Napa, frankly. And we drove into the place in Spain, and it was just ugly. I mean, I love the wines and I love Spain, and it was just from a visual standpoint, it was just not how it's supposed to be. But to give them some credit, that wine region is fairly new in regards to being open for tourists. It's not new as far as making wine, so they're just not prepared with the beautiful structures and the made for tourists views driving in, like Napa Valley is and things. So
they should listen in on our podcast and really learn about the experience portion and how important that is.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Kick up their game.
So we should be consultants. They should pay us to come over there and rate them on their experiences, as well as taking pictures.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, ironically, that's where when we got into this is literally just days ago. Lori found a trip to Bordeaux, said we should do this, and it's a 3-day everything included trip, and you stay at a nice chateau, etc. Wasn't terribly expensive because everybody's trying to get travel going these days. And I said, well, if we go there, we have to spend an extra week or two doing other things. How far away is Burgundy? How far away is the Rhone? Oh, Rioja's not that far away. We could fly into Madrid, go to Rioja, Ribera del Duero, like you said, and then go on to Bordeaux. So we're literally, this is great because, I never would have known that if I hadn't happened to mention it here in this talk. So.
I've got along with you, Jeff, every time. The moment we started talking on the phone, we get along, but you just went way up in my book because you already know Ribera del Duero.
Yeah, I was going to go to Nevada and Jumilla and all that stuff.
How do we pronounce it in English? Is it Ribera del Duero?
Yeah.
Because it's one of those where I speak some Spanish and I even have a hard time pronouncing that, but it's cringy. It's like when people say Ibiza, it's cringy. Just say Ibiza. It's English.
Right.
Anyway, so that's a tangent. I have a new saying for the show. We could talk all day. We said that a lot of times last time, but we got to move on to what I really want to talk about was color in terms of trends. And thanks to, well, let me say this first. Welcome, Julie, officially.
Thank you.
So instead of being the featured person, I would want to make sure that everybody knows. Well, we've been talking now, so people already know, but Julie has a ton of experience in a lot of different areas of photography down there in Melbourne. And we're going to find out pretty soon if she ever gets out of Melbourne, I think. And, but including, even though you've been talking about workshops, I know I've seen your website, you have great work and in a lot of different genres. You've even exhibited, right? And
yeah.
So just officially welcome, Julie. And when we were starting the show, the vision is to bring in an article that we can critique. And the reason I came up with it was there was one that wasn't related to color that I wanted to critique. My response was, why didn't this person ask me? They know me and this is my wheelhouse and I have some complaints about it. Now, that's not going to happen today because it's a very easy discussion. It's not going to be a strong critique, but the idea is we could bring in to critique and add what experience we have with color, whatever that is. And in yours, you have been doing this already for a few years. Is that right? Where you look at the trend of the color for that year, early in the year? Yeah.
So it started probably 4 years ago, and just looking at what the color trends they say are going to be, whether for fashion, but also interior design, houses, all sorts of things like that. And sometimes there's a crossover, and sometimes they're completely like fashion might be at one end of the spectrum, whereas interior design will be at the other. The other aspect of what I shoot most of the time is still life and product photography. So that's where I really sort of take on board what the colour trends are going to be. And some years I think they're absolutely ghastly. But it's something, I guess, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use the colour trends that are around, but if you're wanting to do work that's going to get picked up by magazines or something like that, then they're going to be looking for a particular colour palette for that season or that year or whatever. And Pantone always release a colour for the year, or a couple of colours for the year. And yeah, all the magazines and everything tend to run with it early on.
Do you know how do you know how they arrive at that? Are they asking, or are they looking at what's already happening, or are they trying to drive something new? Do you know how that happens?
Not 100%. No, I often wonder if they sit there with, a colour chart and just throw darts, because they're so random. And they frequently come up with weird names. I mean, Very Perry is the colour of the year, which is a mauve sort of colour.
I'm going all year with guacamole for sure. That's on your list.
Yeah. But I mean, it depends. I mean, last year it was it last year that was creams and blues, like, the real Wedgwood China colours, And that worked in really well with what I was shooting, because I'm happy to go with that. I've shot a little bit of the mauve this year, but some of the other colours that are in the palette just aren't working for me.
I like the guacamole idea, because then the drunk photographer, when he spills guacamole, if he has a guacamole shirt on, blends right in.
Yeah.
Or
it goes with wine.
Would be a great one.
There you
too.
go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Little burgundy.
Definitely. Burgundy, yeah.
Sure.
The whole spaghetti bolognese works really well too. So,
so you would use these...
Sorry?
Oh, so you would use these color palettes, like say if you're doing a product shoot, and I assume the product has already it's the product, so it has its colors, it has its labels, it has whatever it has, and you can't change that color. So what you're going to do is then use the trends for backgrounds and props, and this.
I usually bring it in with props. So if you're doing say food photography or something like that, generally you're going to be the food is obviously going to be the hero of your piece, and everything else is going to be fairly neutral. But I would still, bring in a bit of a pop of colour, whether it's a napkin or something like that you could bring in that colour that you're using. I mean, it doesn't always work. I mean, some colours just are more interior design colours or fashion colours than they work with food or whatever. So, I mean, there's no point in having something that's a really glary napkin colour if it just makes the food look very unappetizing.
Can you tell us, you mentioned, and I didn't look at it this time, I looked at some time ago, is using Adobe Color. Can you tell us how that's a tool, actually, isn't it, for kind of guiding creativeness in color?
It's really interesting that's another place to go to look for trends and things like that. So if you go to Adobe Color on the web, there's a couple of different elements that you can go into. So if you wanted to have a particular color scheme and you wanted complementary colors for that. So, I mean, this Very Perry is the color of the year. So you would punch in what that code is, and Pantone have a code for that. And then you could ask for a complementary color, and Adobe would give you a whole color wheel, and you could sort of have a spectrum of what works. Yeah. But you can also bring in an image, and it will give you a color sample of everything in that image. And you can make gradients and things like that out of it. It's a really, really handy tool. But if you go to what's trending, then there's a whole heap of images there that have a whole heap of different color palettes. And you can work within those color palettes, and you can actually save the color palettes as, future things that you want to work with.
Yeah, I went in there just now and I put in that Very Perry, and it gives everything from examples to you're right, complementary colors, and wow.
Yep.
That's a good tool, Adobe Color. Color.adobe.com, right? Yeah. Color.
Yeah. It's fun to play around with. I teach in some of the classes that I'm running, especially the online ones, because I'm not there in person. So we do usually have an element of colour, and I take them straight into that and show them how they can pick a particular colour and work from there, whether it's, they want to have a monotone image, or, they want to have something white and bright and really colourful or whatever. But it's a really, really great tool to play with.
Rob, are you finding that house staging companies are going with the color trend yet? Greens and purples?
It's interesting looking at the different color schemes. Like a lot of these in our industry with real estate, if you're working with a stager, most stagers have a warehouse full of furniture and cushions and things that they've had for been collecting for years. So they can't really go and change their color schemes year after year after year, because that would just be incredibly expensive. But I do see that there are designers that do keep up with those trends as well. And so it's like this year is the blues, this year is the greens, this year is the purples, and they do change that up. And what I find is that for us, what I found really interesting when we talk about color is, so for example, when we do our exteriors at night and there's a little bit of a sunset in the back, I found that depending on the year, the the clients will say, "Oh, that sky looks too blue, or it looks too green, or it looks too purple, or it looks too," and what it is like it's adjusting the tint. And I'm finding that this year people like to have just a little bit more of the magenta tint in their blue skies than they did last year or the year before, where before they wanted to have like this almost crisp, like a navy blue kind of sky, and now they want more of this purplish kind of sky. I find that to be interesting. And actually, Jeff, you'd be the one to know about how to change the tint and color of the skies and what's popular this year versus last and all that.
Yeah, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with color trends because, most people think as humans, when we go out at night, we think, oh, it's dark. So, early on, people were making everything go black and they were underexposing or they were adding contrast and just making it go to black. And then as sensors got better, they'd start to see a little bit of green. You go, oh, what's all that green? And then you figure out that it's oxygen and it's the same color green that you get with aurora. And it's called Airglow, and you get that in these kind of mid-northern latitudes. There's often a thin layer of green. You can see it from space station footage as they're flying around the Earth, a very thin layer of green. And your camera will pick that up. And so you do have kind of a color calibration that if you're getting aurora green, and most of us have seen enough aurora shots that we know what color that is, and it's very specific because it's coming right out of oxygen atoms, and it's always the same green. So, if your color's right at night. But as we talk about trends, some people, especially lately, have been doing it very cool. They'll drag the slider of the white balance and go really cool towards blue. Or sometimes you'll be talking to people who are more astronomers, and they have the idea that, well, no, it really has to be a daylight white balance. And that's the only way to do it correctly. I don't know why they want daylight if they're at night, but that's an extremely warm white balance, and that'll actually often make your sky really brown, which is really, to me, very bizarre. So, and I did see it wasn't until just recently I figured out why, or had some indication why some people might want to do a blue night sky. There was just, I think in the latest issue of Outdoor Photographer magazine, the author said, well, I want to make the night sky the color people would expect. And you go out during the day and it's blue, so obviously they're going to expect the color of the night sky to be blue. And that kind of blew my mind because I never expected it to be blue. But at least that might explain why some people might be talked into that as something to override the natural color of the sky with. And if you're not doing a high enough ISO to pick up the actual color that's there, the real color, the green color, if there's airglow on that night, then absolutely you're probably going to be searching around for something to make it. Or if you have a lot of light pollution, you're not necessarily going to get the natural color, so you won't know, that there's green up there in the sky. So, to each his own, they can do what they want. But where I'm shooting out here, it's so dark, you can almost always get some natural color, and that's what I want to see. I grew up with Carl Sagan talking about the billions and billions of stars, and I think it's cool that I can see them, and now that I know they're in color, it's even, at least the sky is, it's even more cool. So I just want to capture as much of that as I can.
So there's a color in design, and there's color that applies to, say, composing a photo that has colors as subjects. And then as Jeff's talking about, there's choices in color. How do you decide what color the sky is going to be? And it's funny, I've dealt with that a lot with 360 tour kind of things, where it's so easy to get a fake looking sky, and it's just a little bit goes too far in either direction, cold, warm, or fake.
It often varies with the white balance of what lights you have. So if you have a fluorescent and a LED and an incandescent, you're going to get green, blue, and warm all in the same room.
That's something that's been a battle for ever. Like I'd say with interiors, without using lighting, because for 360 things, lighting is it's near impossible in any reasonable amount of time to light a 360. And real estate and things that you don't have time usually for lighting. And Rob's chomping at the bit here, but I'll throw it to you in a second. But my challenge with color always is to get the color correct. So what the eye sees, that's always the thing with bracketed images. Then you bring the bracketed images together, and when you think of what goes into color, HSL, right? Hue, saturation, luminance. Luminance is a factor in color. And when I'm taking bracketed shots at different luminance values, that affects the color. So it's a real challenge to get that final thing to be real, what the eye sees. And in post-processing, it's possible, of course, takes a little effort. And then one way to fix that is to bring in a light. Isn't that right, Rob, as I throw you the softball question?
Yes, and you can listen all about me talking about that in my upcoming course, so stay tuned for that. But actually, Julie, one of the things I was wondering was, interesting, like with these new color trends and that you see, one of the things that I've been seeing a lot of is portraits using colored lights. So you would have like a magenta key light with a green fill light to create this kind of like neon kind of portrait. Are you seeing that kind of stuff? Or do your colors come into that?
We had this whole thing that was happening with gels for a while, but it's faded off again. So everybody was jumping in and doing a whole heap of gels, and we were doing it here too. And, the whole green versus orange and the purple and, the blues and magentas and really going sort of, a bit wild with it. And it's a lot of fun, but I've found that I'm not seeing them so much anymore.
I think that was the 80s that was happening.
Definitely.
That's old. That's
I don't know about
classic.
You guys, but we bring everything back. We have to recycle everything. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, the mullets are back here. It's just,
all right.
But yeah, it's the gels. I work with a lot of really, really strong colours in the work that I do. And even though I go and see what the colour tones are for the year, I then always go back to pretty much what I'm doing. Just about everything I do, especially whether it's even in still life or portraits, I do everything really, really dark with these super saturated colours. And I'm always, doesn't matter what it is, I go for the purples, I go for the blues, and I go for the reds because I just find that they pop. And just give you that real high contrast. So I sort of take on board what the colour trends are and then disregard them a lot of the time. Unless I go, oh, cool, that works with what I like to shoot.
That's
which is
just
what
like how Ron and
year.
I do the drone work. We listen to what the regulations are, and then we go, wow, okay, well, that's good to know. We'll do our own thing anyway.
What you were saying about interiors before, I have seen in magazines and stuff online and whatever, that there's a big of a trend here where they tend to keep everything neutrals, and the greys were in for quite a while, but then they bring in with the soft furnishings, so things that are cheap that they can replace, like cushion covers and things like that, and that's where they're bringing in these pops of colour. So I think in some regards with the colours that are coming out, they have this real sort of baseline of neutral, and then they have these really strong pop of colour, whether it's, the guacamole green or the bright orange. Rust is like another really bright colour. So they're just bringing those in. Are you finding that over there as well, or is it just something that we're doing here? I don't know.
Rust is always popular at the ghost towns.
those interior ghost town shots.
Yeah.
It's like the popular color of cars in Ghost Town, right?
The classic rusty old tractor HDR that it gets too crunchy, that gets overdone.
Love those shots.
Oh, those are the bane of my. What's the word for that? Bane of my existence. It's
bane.
You started talking about color temperatures of lights. I've started to work a lot more with LED panels where I can set the white balance because, a lot of people are carrying the too bright LED lights and they're too cool, or you have the incandescents, which can be a little on the warm side. Then you have to correct everything in post. which can be kind of a pain if you're building your car sticks up into the sky and you can't process the foreground separately, or if you're picking up a lot of the landscape around and then the light wasn't on the rest of the landscape as much as it was on the car or the building. So we're setting up light stands now with color temperature adjustable panel lights and being able to dial in the foreground and the subject to about the same color that we think we're going to have the sky be. And that actually can vary too, because like out at Bodie, where there's no real town on the horizon, you don't have a lot of light pollution. But if you're down closer to Mono Lake, you have a lot of incandescent and some LED lights from the town of Lee Vining on the tufa rock formations, for example. So the light pollution that's illuminating your landscape and your subjects can be different depending on where you go or even what direction you shoot. So you may have to change your light a little bit if you really want to get it looking natural to, to get your subject to match the surrounding, landscape.
Wow. So it's the new gel. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
I use the LEDs, and you can change from cool to warm, and it's really interesting. I've noticed because I use them in workshops when I'm running them and for still life and products and stuff like that, people are always cranking in one way or the other.
Right.
You get one person in, oh, no, that's too warm, and they crank it all the way down to the blues. Then the next person's like, no, it's too blue, and they crank it up. So there's this real sort of personal preference whether people would prefer to go warm or cool. And I guess in some things it's irrelevant. It's what your personal choice is. But other things, I mean, if you have something way too warm on food, it's just going to look weird. But the same with, if you have it way too cool, some things you want it to look real, like, with the sky or whatever. Mm-hmm. But other things that just, whatever you want.
It's one of my favorite themes in photography. There's just so many ways to go, so many good, every right answer. It always depends. I love that. Maybe with when you're trying to get it correct, there are much less right answers. But when you have all the choices in the world and all your personal preferences, it just depends. And it's one of my favorite things about it.
I guess it depends on if you're a creative photographer or a technical photographer.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we can adjust it in post in most cases.
Yeah. Photography is one of those great jobs where you can screw up a lot and fix it later.
That's what I'm going to do when I keep talking over you guys. I'm going to fix it later. So to put a bookend on this, Julie, same question. You can go anywhere, all expenses paid. Where is it? For photography. For the show, it should be for photography.
For photography, it's really hard. There's so many places that you could go.
California?
That'd be awesome. I'd love to go and shoot in Tuscany in like a field of sunflowers or something like that. That would just be absolutely amazing. Or, as Jeff said before, Iceland, but that's just too easy. There's so many places that you could go that are incredible. So, I reckon you could pretty much, pick me up and dump me anywhere and I could have an absolute ball. So
how is Vanuatu this time of year?
That bad,
excuse me.
He does not want to go. He does not want to go to the island.
He doesn't want to go there. He's worried about all the cyclones that are hitting it.
Well, let's start to wrap up here and give a chance for everyone to make sure listeners know where they can find out more about them. We're on audio. We talk about their work, but where is it, Jeff?
Best place to start would be my website, jeffsullivanphotography.com. We started to rebrand ourselves in January 2020, and everybody knows what happened about a month or two later. So we incorporated as Great Basin School of Photography, but we never quite got it launched because it's like, okay, well, when people can travel again.
Right.
But Jeff Sullivan Photography works for now. That would be great. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, Jeff Sullivan Photography. I'm on Flickr. You can find me all the usual places where photographers are.
And we'll put all this in the show notes and on the photo focus post for this audio show. And
Perfect,
Julie,
thanks.
besides photofocus.com, where can people find you?
So at juliepowellphotography.com, pretty much everything is listed there. Everyone's local to Melbourne, I've got my list of workshops. I've got a list of classes. There's about 25 online classes from all sorts of things. But yeah, the usual places: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Not so big on Twitter and Flickr these days, but yeah, most social media you can find me there or online.
I'm learning that Julie and Jeff too are some of the very hardworking photographers, just from having talked over the last days to organize this. I know you guys are doing a lot of things. We already knew that about you, Rob, but where do we find you?
Well, you can find me at robmoroto.com. That's where you can find me personally. Email me from there, and I'm always up to chatting with new photographers or photographers starting out. Like I said, we're starting out this whole mentoring thing, and I'm quite enjoying that. And I've got a new course coming up. So again, go to robmoroto.com to sign up for that. And aside from that, well, I guess I'm on Instagram.
You are.
But that's about it. I'm like the bad photographer. You can't find me anywhere.
We all seem to have our own name URLs, so you can pretty much find photographers that way these days, right?
Well, let's face it. Photographers, we are vain and narcissistic, and that's why we always get our own URLs.
Well, that's why we're on an audio podcast. We don't have to worry about our hair. That was an inside joke at Rob.
Yeah. I almost refused to come onto this podcast because I had to wear headphones, and I was worried about how that would make my hair look.
Yeah.
It's tough on podcasts.
That's
it really is.
Well, these will be in the show notes. And Jeff, I know you're going into a workshop starting tomorrow. And
then a week after that, after we get back, we'll go to Death Valley.
I'm going to try to get in the car and crash that party.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're doing Horsetail Falls this week in Yosemite, and then a week after we get back, Milky Way in Death Valley. And then not too long after that, we'll be back out in Yosemite for the moonbows, the lunar rainbows at night in the mist of the waterfalls.
Lunar rainbows at night?
Yep.
This is something I've never heard of.
A rainbow forms a circle that's 45 degrees in diameter. It's 22.5 degrees from the ray of the sun going into a water droplet and coming out. You can also bounce the sun off the moon, and the full moon will go into a water droplet and at the same angle create a rainbow coming out of those water droplets. So if you know where the water's going to be, like at the base of a waterfall, and you know approximately when you can stand at a given spot and see a rainbow, you could go get all the moonbows you want. You come back there every year around the time of the full moon and get a nice big either single or sometimes double rainbow.
So what's at the end of a rainbow or a moonbow? Is there a
lot
pot
of
of gold?
You get wet. You'd have to swim in this case under the waterfalls. You probably don't want to do that in the spring.
Fair enough.
I've never, maybe it's me. Maybe I recognize it when I see it, but I have not heard of that. So
no,
it actually usually your eyes don't have the rods and cones. Your eyes aren't sensitive enough to usually pick up the color, but it's right near the threshold. So sometimes the mist and the moon is bright enough and the mist gets thick enough that the color pops in. So you might see a black and white, like shaded colors of gray rainbow, and then boom, it pops in at color, or it pops in, out, in, out, in, out, and it's kind of flashing as waves of mist go in front of that just exactly that right angle where the different colors would come out at you. So it's pretty wild. It's really cool to see, especially when it does kind of pop out at you in color. So yeah, I need to do video of that, especially when I don't know if the video you could get it to have that same threshold effect. It would probably just sit there in color.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm looking forward to finding out more about moonbows.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the one you have to come to.
Okay, sounds good. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Julie from Down Under.
Thanks for having me.
Jeff from the Towns of Ghosts. And Rob, who is the best looking lighting for an audio podcast.
And amazing hair.
And amazing hair. All right, this is the going gray-haired Ron Pepper saying thanks to everyone who joined here. Thanks for everyone for listening. Send us your comments for future shows. And we'll see you for the March Roundtable.
Photographers, we are vain and narcissistic.
People are just playing with them and doing bad things.
So I sort of take on board what the colour trends are and then disregard them a lot of the time.
Fortunately, we can adjust it in post.